what happens when you purify your body, your mind, your spirit. Something miraculous. The body begins to heal itself. Welcome to the Medicine Girl podcast, where each week we explore new ways to heal your body from the root, igniting your inner healer. You are the medicine. And now, here's your host, Robin Stebbins.
Welcome to the Medicine Girl podcast, Lindsay. I would love for you to introduce yourself. Just a little backstory, though. I saw your post on Instagram and literally jumped out of my seat. Was like, yes, finally, someone is saying the truth, which is go.
So, introduce myself first. Sorry.
Yeah. Do it all. You got it.
I'm Lindsay Carricarte. I'm a spiritual practitioner, coach, and just all around kind of junkie of consciousness and spiritual awakening. And the post Robin's referring to is, speaking about trusting our inner guidance. And that's really been like, so spiritual awakening is really kind of my jam. It's just my area that I love and that I'm obsessed with, because my life kind of unfolded where I was constantly seeking that external, everything from validation to answers to safety to security, everything I could seek outside of myself, I did. And it just led to so much of my own illness, my struggling, my suffering, all of it. So in the course of my own life journey and my own awakening process, just coming to this place of unshakably trusting what I feel and know within is what drives everything I do. It's what drives my coaching. It's what drives my content. It's what drives my writing. It's just what drives my whole mission, because I feel like that's what we're all here doing.
100%. Yeah. And I think, what I'm doing right now is I'm writing a playbook on what they use against us. And the first order of business, at 0 to however old, separate you from your intuition, from that internal knowing. And they do it with the liarrhea they're spilling out everywhere from, your intelligence. Like, let's put you in a windowless, airless room at 6 years old, tell you to stare at a authority figure and listen to them drone on for 6 hours. And if you can't do it, we're going to give you methamphetamines.
Yeah.
And,
right,
and from there on, it just is like, there's another thing. And there's another way to separate you from that inner knowing, because it is truly our guidance system. And then we're taught to seek fulfillment outside of ourselves.
That's the whole machine right there, right? Like the whole machine of consumerism, capitalism, all the things. Like it drives on us seeking outside. And, like it goes to show us like actually how deep that program of separating us from our intuition goes. But the simple fact of like, when you bring something to, say I was to like walk into a room or a party or family gathering, and I was to just come out with something that I understood intuitively, guaranteed you, if there were 20 people in the room, 10 of them would be like, well, how do you know that? What's your sources? What expert, right? And they would all want to know what external expert told me that was the truth. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's the biggest thing I think we see on social media too, is like, you see that backlash that we get, and how deep the program goes of like, well, someone with a degree or someone with an approved level of expertise in that area has to sign off on that. Otherwise, it's not true. Right. And that's just one more way for the mind to just dismiss this stuff that it's like a cognitive dissonance. And
it's
wild.
That's it. And so I think the way they, at least the way I see that they do it, is that they figure out who among the herd is going to be the best parrots, the best channels for their information and to further their agenda. So they'll tell you those with high IQ. They'll give you a high number. They're going to tell you you're smarter than everybody else, you're better than everybody else, and that you know the answers. But meanwhile, you're the one that's best at regurgitating the information the way they want you to regurgitate it. Not thinking for yourself, Because I think, in 2020, we saw like the quote, intelligent people were the ones that were, with a bullhorn, just like, get your jibby jabbies and do what you're told and wear 4 masks. And, there's no logic to it. There's no critical thinking, no creative thinking. So
None.
that is what is furthering the machine of destruction, in my opinion, because you have, that's what I heard. And you're now but then it's even worse. You got your white coat and your stethoscope. So it's, what do the gods tell us to do next?
It's so wild too. Like, I think it was 2020. So I've really seen through a lot of this for a long time, especially in areas of like the money system, the financial system, right? The school system. There are so many ways where I was seeing through it, but it wasn't until 2020 that I really, really, really saw exactly what you were saying, where it was like the supposedly intelligent people, the supposed like experts, right? And I just saw how it was like literally word for word, just repetition of this, like the science, right? The science
trust the
that nobody's
science.
allowed to question. And
Oh,
it's
I'll
like, if
trust
it's
the
not
science, thank you.
yeah, because if you can't question it, I don't think it's still science, right? It's not
Right.
science. That's fucking propaganda. Sorry, I'm dropping F bombs. But no, that was the first time I really, really saw that, where it was like, holy crap. And, I remember it stood out to me so much because I remember having this moment at the start of it. It was before even all the like nonsense really got to like its height. Sitting on our porch with my husband, and I was like, this is bullshit. I looked at him and I said, watch. I said, this is a thing. And I said, watch. It's going to be a thing, and it's all going to be BS, and I don't believe any of it. And I went through this period where I had to like really deeply question myself because I was not getting swept up in the madness. And I was like, okay, maybe I had that moment, right? As I'm sure you have, of like, maybe I am just crazy. Is it me? Because and it was just that feeling in my gut. It was like, hell no.
Yep.
And there was like a huge, huge, huge transition for me in just how deeply I was able to trust, that inner knowing and that inner understanding of just how powerfully we can navigate ourselves.
And that's exactly right. Because when you have that inner knowing, like, you can't convince me of anything. You can give me all of the evidence, but I am going to always trust what my inner knowing is. My eyes see, my senses are telling me, which is why we're dangerous. That's why they want us out of the picture, because we're like, no, I'm not complying, and no, I'm not going to be quiet, and this isn't normal. Like, this is crazy, and it's just going to get worse. So it's more, waking as many people up as we can to create more of an organized system, so that we starve the system. Because I truly don't believe there's the head of a snake you can cut off. Like, you'll just make it worse. People are like, oh, kill this guy. And it's like, no, there's 25 more waiting in the wings that are probably 100 times worse.
100%. Yeah, starve the system. That's like a good way to put it too, because that's exactly what it's being fed on, right? It's being fed on the energy. It's being fed on the fear. It's being fed on the complacency. And it's I think sometimes we don't realize either, like, how profoundly we can like impact somebody else, not even by speaking necessarily, but just what we're doing. And I realized that too at the start of COVID. I was like walking into a store and I heard these 2 ladies, and they're standing outside, and they're all, because there was like a sign on the door about masks, and they looked at us and they're like, well, they're not wearing masks, so we're not wearing masks either. Like, we just walked in. So it's like this ripple effect.
You give them permission.
Like, when somebody sees you just out there not complying, not living in fear, not abiding by the BS, it just creates such a profound little ripple out.
I agree with that. And looking healthy. Like, I made an attempt to like really, go in there nicely dressed, never wore a mask. And I did, like, sometimes people would come up to you like, you don't have to wear a mask in here. I was like, no, of course not. course not. Take it off. They're not going to say no, that you can't buy your groceries or whatever else it is. It's just like some people are more programmed than others. And so you have to like step into that role, at a certain point and just say, no, I will be the guiding light here for now until we can all level up and walk side by side. But
I'll take the confrontation. I'll take the flag. I don't care. I don't care who looks at me sideways. Yeah, because it's crazy how deep, again, the program goes with people who don't even realize that they are allowed to question something. Like so many people, you see people go into the doctor and they just don't even advocate for themselves, or they just don't even, it's like the doctor says one thing and against their better judgment, they just go along with what that person has said. And it's like, what? You're that cut off from that ability and that permission of listening to yourself. Like that programming is so deep.
And that's what I do on the daily. I'm a registered nurse. I do home health and hospice and all of that. So I see how deep the programming is. And I had like patients that will start shaking or crying when I tell them, you've got to go and talk to the doctor and get off of these medications. They're killing you. I mean, what other industry could we say, if I was your financial advisor and you were bankrupt, you'd be clearly upset with me for my poor advice. But when it's your doctor and your health deteriorates after you see them, they get a get out of jail free card. Every single time. It's like the programming is so deep with the medical industrial complex that it's hard to tear away. Like people, and even on the freedom community, I'm going hard on vitamin D3, how it's rat poison and, it's very detrimental drug. And ivermectin is a horrible pharmaceutical, as is hydroxychloroquine. But if they could burn my house down, they would. They're so like, no, these are the good ones because I read this. And this good expert said that these were the good drugs.
Just because it worked on one thing or worked on one thing and tried to, and because they suppressed it, then that's probably the craziest thing that also that I have encountered is in the truth community, freedom community, quote unquote awakens, right? Community. Right. There's still this very real, did I just turn that off? Sorry. This very real, like inability to think for oneself and think critically. Like that you still see the level of like looking to somebody outside of themselves for the answers. And it's like the health thing and the physical body thing is like the most wild because it's like people are so detached from this understanding that your body can heal itself and will heal itself if it has everything it needs and it has the nutrition that, we are just so capable of healing and repair. But it's like we've been so far removed from that, which to me, I think goes right along with the inner knowing, the intuition, the inner guidance. It's like, we all have this inner wisdom, that inner intelligence, totally connected to source, spirit, God, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter to me. And that's all part of it. And it's like, I love the layers, right? And you just pull back the layers and it goes so deep, right? Because it's like you get into religion and how religion wants to put God, spirit, source outside of us. You get into education and it wants to put the higher wisdom outside of us in the form of a paper or a university or a professor. And it's just, it all the way down, it's the same theme of like, nope, everything that makes you powerful is out there.
Everything that makes you powerful out there. And you have to have the interpreter. Interpreter for the education system, interpreter for God, interpreter for the medical industrial complex, whatever it is, somebody smarter than you, more intelligent than you, has to tell you about what should go in your body because you don't know.
Yeah. No, you wouldn't know that.
You would never know that. Not in a million years. And we need to get your blood and test all of these pharmaceutical funded lab values with pharmaceutical funded drugs that go with the pharmaceutical abnormal ranges. But, nothing to see here. I'm sure that's fine. You can trust them. They're known
It's
fellows,
probably
but that's okay.
that was another really like profound moment of like, holy crap for me was when I started to understand like studies, right? Because you know how like, so,
There you
okay,
go.
it's like, we're old enough to remember like early internet days, you know what I mean? Before social
Yep.
media was really a thing. And it was like, if you wanted information, you had to go looking for it. Now we just get the information constantly because of social media, stuff like that. We're like always connected. And so, studies and information, it was like before I ever really thought about it. And then all of a sudden, when I had the moment of realization, like, oh, I see what's going on here. Okay, so they want cholesterol to look bad or whatever it might be, a certain food, dairy. And then you look at, follow the money is a thing for the reason. You look at who funds the study and you're like, of course.
Yes.
Of course the study's going to say that because that's what they were aiming at.
Yeah.
That's what they were leaning at. And that was a real moment for me because side note, when I was 28, I had cancer. I had Hodgkin's lymphoma. And this was right before I really woke up. I like really had a huge awakening about 5-6 years after that. So when I first got diagnosed with cancer, like I didn't even understand what cancer was. I just didn't. And I immediately, I was like living with a hijacked nervous system. So I immediately just went into like shut down, panic, fight or flight. And I just deferred to the doctor, So I did all the chemo, I did all the radiation, cleared the cancer, all that. And I remember them telling me when they were doing radiation on me, well, now, this is going to make you more prone to breast cancer in the future because I was getting all this radiation here. And I remember sitting there before I even understood anything about my intuition, my instincts, creating my own reality, thinking in my head, oh, to hell no, I'm not. Like, and I am deciding in my mind that I was not having this experience again.
Yeah.
And so sure enough, then shortly after that, completed that treatment, did all that, had my awakening, started to really explore all of this stuff. And I really started to understand, first of all, why I even had cancer in the first place, the energetic and spiritual and emotional reasons of that, my diet and everything else. And then I started to understand exactly why people will continue to have like the repeat experiences. You know what I mean? You keep going to a doctor, you keep going to a place where they keep telling you, oh, this is a risk and this is going to happen. And you just buy into it, and that's exactly.
I think it's deeper too, Lindsay. It's like, I want to just hammer that home. They're casting spells on you.
Casting spells.
Because there's no such thing as a diagnosis.
Exactly.
That's another huge fraud. You have a set of symptoms. Like pneumonia, it's just you have mucus in the lungs. There's no computer program that goes through your body and scans it. It's like, oh, 100% pneumonia. Here's the bacteria. Here's the sputum. No. They just are guessing for everything. And then again, follow the money. It's a diagnostic code. So the insurance company will pay for X diagnostic code. That's all it is. And the cancer treatments, I don't know, most people know the doctor that diagnoses you with cancer and then prescribes the radiation or the chemo, they get a commission.
I did not know that.
They get paid money. You can't get paid money from the pharmaceutical industry. They can give you trips and incentivize you in other ways. They can't give you money, but they can give you money and upwards of 30% of every treatment that you have done.
Makes a lot of sense.
Once again, be very cautious of who's diagnosing you with what and what is it. Maybe it's an encapsulated ball of toxins because of
toxins.
Diet, your exposure to something that the body has walled off and is getting rid of.
Yeah. And the acidity, right? Like my big thing is emotions and the spiritual sort of side of things. And it's like, it was after I had cancer. So if I had understood this before, I obviously would have treated it in a very different way. But the understanding of us as the whole human, right? And how that pharmaceutical and modern medicine industry has been the poor mafia, I like to call them, right? It's
Yeah.
so rooted in like treating everything as separation, right? Like treating symptoms, constantly grabbing a hold of a symptom and diagnosing it as this thing, and then everybody clings to the diagnoses, like it's, you know what I mean? And like
They
you said,
become it.
yeah, and it's all just casting spells, and it's like that's another layer of it with medicine, with our health, with our treatment, with the news. You know, it's just this constant. And then there's everybody staring at the thing, and it's like, of course you're going to keep creating that because you're hyper focused on it.
Yeah, you're hyper focused on it, but when you hear like somebody say, "Oh, you have ADHD," or you have, you know, or the spiritual community, you have this trauma, and this trauma, you know, keep talking about this trauma that you have,
Talking about it.
keep retelling your story, and take your MDMA and your heart openers, and keep telling that story again and again and again. It's the same, like they don't see it's the same system, but it's just like spun a little bit differently. They're still on a hamster wheel, but it's like, you know, got like lights on it and it looks cool. It's like a hippie hamster wheel, but it's still a hamster wheel.
It's still a hamster wheel. That's right. That's right. And then, you know what, too? It's like, I think I've realized watching that, like, so because also, like, smack in the middle of like after my awakening, probably when I was like starting my own business, right? And I was like, I started looking to all these coaches and all these online experts, and I started looking for all the information. And I remember just, you know, I would pay all this money for this guidance and this coaching and teach me your systems and teach me your stuff and teach me, right?
Yeah.
And then I would go through it and I would, in my gut, I would reject it. And I would be like, this isn't for me. You know what I mean? And it's not working. And it's exactly that, though. It was like, it was still the same. I see it in hindsight, of course, right? It was the same pattern of somebody knows more than me. You know, and it wasn't until I really got to the place where I recognized there isn't anybody who knows more than me or better than me for me. For me. You know what I mean? Yes, there may be people out there who hold more information about a particular subject. But
I don't even think that. Like, I used to think that too. I was like, okay, they have more knowledge about this certain subject. But now that I've seen the level of corruption and the studies are all crap. Like I figured that out when I was 1992, or it was like 89 to 92, doing my undergraduate psychology degree. Mm-hmm. And we had to graduate, do our own study.
Uh-huh.
I worked at a locked psychiatric hospital at the time, and I was going to use my schizophrenic patients for their negative behaviors and the psychotropics were they working. And I just made all the data up because it's like, I'm tired. I just want to get it done. And then I was like, oh, I'm probably not the only one that's been doing this. And then I look at, it's probably all of it. They're using, so I have to use the last 10 studies. So I'm just gonna repeat what they did because done, easy. That's it. And of course I knew I wasn't going to get published, so it wasn't like a moral issue. But then you think it's all of it. It's not just the medical stuff. It's everything. And everything is our demise, our destruction, our consumerism to get us to put our heads down, work 20, 30 hours, 50, 60, turn that into energy and then have them glean that off of us.
Yep.
So that's why it's like that's the playbook.
Yeah, it's like, speaking of studies too, it's funny. I literally was watching something earlier today about how this woman was in the UK. So she was talking specifically about the UK, and she said how this study, these statistics came out, and there is something like upwards of almost 30% excess mortality for the first 3 months of last year in the UK. And everybody knows the UK went like batshit crazy during all the stuff. And it's more, so there's all these extra deaths that have, insane amount of numbers more than any other year. And it's predominantly males in this age bracket of like 35 to 55. And they're all unknown, like never diagnosed before heart issues, right? And it's like, so that right there in itself, it's like to take something like that and put it in front of somebody's face for them to go through their day and hear that and not have a red flag go off in their head, right? Like, how does something inside not, because this is me, it's like something like that lands in my field, and it's like I immediately have this like alarm bell inside, right? Like different bullshit. It's like my bullshit detector, right? And so I've spent a lot of time kind of contemplating, why are so many people just not even tuned into that BS detector, right? Why do so many people see this information go by or encounter the information and not have that? And I've realized like a couple things, right? The information overload. So many people are, and I feel like the nervous system is such a key part of it, right? It's like so many people are just so inundated with stimulus that they just can't, they don't even have the space and capacity to hear that. You know, to hear the ring ding 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 ding, hey, look, it's another thing of BS, you know? Or how many people will never even stop and think I could even have a different reality besides working 50, 60, or 70 hours and struggling to pay my bill.
Exactly. And maybe the system stacked against us for a reason to get us distracted. Like this phone now, I mean, I'm sure you're aware, like when you go out and about, because I'm never on my phone in public places. I hate it. But
me too. I
go hiking and people are on their phones hiking, like scrolling and hiking. Like, what is going on? Or at dinner, a couple sitting next to each other, they're both on their phones, but without apologies. Like, oh, sorry, you know, I had to do something. It's just like, no, this is what we're doing now.
Yeah, right. No connection. And that's the layers again. It's like, I feel like we're just in this like very profound time. And that's why like I post the things that I do, right? That's why I talk about what I talk about in my content, because I feel like we're all at, like, everybody's at these crossroads, right? Now, some of us are already kind of well on that journey, like up or out, you know, for lack of a better word. I don't want to say good or bad because everybody experiences what they need to, but it's like you're either going to go deeper into like the disconnection, you're going to go deeper into like the inorganic nature of that machine, or you're going to rise up and out of it and liberate yourself from it, you know, and that only starts by, you know, being present, connecting, like truly connecting, right? Not being so wrapped up, because what is this? It's like, sometimes I sit and I wonder, how many layers are there? You know, are we like in another dimension?
Yes.
Casting ourselves into this dimension.
Yes. I think so, because, you know, I look back even 4 or 5 years ago, the level of awareness I had compared to now. I'm going to look back in 5 years and think, ooh, wow, I was underneath a lot of stuff too. So just to be patient with it, but really goes back to always like trust that inner knowing, your inner guidance. And I really believe you have to be extremely clean to hear that. Because when you're toxic, when you're eating fast food, you know, I don't know if you know about HEK 293, the flavor enhancer. It's made out of aborted fetal tissue that they put in Dasani water, Pepsi. There's like 300 or 400 products that it goes into. But that creates this chaos and agitation and hyperactivity. So alcohol separates you from your intuition for days and days. Caffeine, you know, we all love our caffeine, but it separates you from that intuition. So it's the cleaner you get, the deeper you're able to hear that wisdom coming from you. And then you can't get tricked again.
That's right. Yeah, that's so true. And everything about the consumerist world and that aspect of it is just connected to that, like you said, the chaos, right? The noise. It's like, that's either, because it's like you're either in that nice, calm, serene state. That's like what it is when you're clean, right? It's like when you clear out your field, you clear out your energy, and you like recalibrate your nervous system, and you're not, and it's like when you're in that hyper. And that's the trauma piece too of like the collective, right? When they constantly have like the things coming out through the news cycle, and there's like a constant bombardment of, I remember realizing that too, where it was like, I think it was something with weather, probably like 10 years ago. I was like watching something and it was like and I just had this moment where I was like, my God, they've even just taken a weather report and made it into like, oh, you know, and like
Yes.
nothing happened with the storm they
Right.
were talking about. And I'm like, this is just such crap.
But it's the same, like when, I mean, it was in the 90s or something, there was a big upheaval in Seattle. So they said, it was like the Seattle riots. And my friend who had just moved, she was in, I think, Bolivia. And we were watching like all of this, these riots going on in Bolivia. And so I called her and I talked to her. She's like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And we were in Seattle at the time. And it was like one little block that they had to be like, the cameraman had to be on the ground filming it to make it look like there was a lot of people there. There's probably like 12 people there. But, you know, and they were throwing fire and whatever. It was silly. And so I called her and she was doing the same thing. She's like, no, it was nothing. There's like 16 people here throwing bottles around, but they made it look like the whole city's
like huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
all manipulation.
Manipulation, the political theater, the news theater, it's the fear porn. Because I think that's mostly what it is. Wait, what you said earlier, you were talking about the belief. It's the belief that we have that then creates it. And that's the one thing I've noticed, you know, working 35 years in healthcare, is when somebody makes the decision to get better, no matter what, they get better, whether it's through matrix meds or holistic drugs, whatever it is, because the body's healing itself. You've now created that radar, boom, I'm going to get better.
So massive, yeah, because it's like, you know, if you think about, it's the, you know, the argument that I always love to offer people, it's like if medicine, the way it's been being practiced was like it, right, and it was like fact and it was based, and I said then every single medicine would work for every single person with that, you know what I mean? If it was so cut and dry as like, you have this is the problem, and here's this, and it doesn't. Why doesn't it, right?
Yeah.
Why doesn't every single person with a diagnosis die or get better, whereas other people do? Like people with like, you know, all the time you hear these quote unquote miracle stories.
Right.
And it's like, that's because there's something so much deeper going on. And it all starts in here. And it's like just the amount of people who don't even, you know, recognize that or believe that or think they have a choice. So and it comes down to the victim, right? Victim consciousness. It's
that's it.
People are so victimized by their body and their health and everything that's happening outside. They don't even realize they're contributing to the creation of it. Right. And that, of course, is by design.
It's by design. They were given the victim baton.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you get to be a victim. And so many people are just like, oh, yeah, I have this disease or that disease. They're just getting, you know, more weighted with that medallion, pulling them down. Instead of, like, for example, I have a friend, Keith Mitchell, who is an NFL football player, tackled on the field, was paralyzed. And you know their ego. So they take him in. And the doctor is, you know, does the x-rays and everything. He's like, you'll never walk again. You're paralyzed for life. And he looked at him. He said, who are you to diagnose me with anything? I will not give you that power. I think that's what we say to all of it.
All of it.
Not in a state of anger or, you know, pounding on walls. It's just like, no. Not right. You don't have that power.
Right.
It's not happening.
That would be the most massive, because, you know, something that when you were talking before about the fear porn, our attention, right? Like our attention is a commodity. It is a currency. And it's like when we refuse to give our attention to something by exactly what you're saying, who are you? Yeah. I'm not buying into that. Yeah. I'm not subscribing to that. No.
They're starving then.
Yeah.
That's how you starve it. That's how you starve it. Because it's not.
You've got to be.
I was just going
But
to say, you can't like organize all of us just to say, okay, we're not buying anything anymore. That's just not going to work. You're not going to organize all of this to, say, okay, we're going to boycott big box stores, we're going to shop local. It's never ever going to work. But when you can teach someone to then, and this is what I'm going to ask you, how can you start to wake somebody up to their own power gently, so that you're not doing it, you're not the authority, you're not coming in like, hello little one, let me help you rise up to my level, because that can be a trap too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the most powerful things we can do for anybody is like when we ask questions, to somebody, not questioning their authority, but like literally asking people like, oh, right, curiosity. Well, why do you think that? You know what I mean? And when somebody comes and they're like deep in that, whatever that approved narrative might be about whatever topic, just starting to question them in ways that, make them think. Because the more we can make somebody think about something, not make as in like, but like be the catalyst for their next line of critical thought, because most people are just not even used to being questioned, and I think when people even just see or hear, because even for me, right? So I always think about theories or things people talk about that when I first heard them, I'm like, that's just absurd, right? And I would reject it. I would reject it as like the most absurd thing ever. And then it would be like, my mind would be like, that's so crazy. Like, why do people even think that, right? And then I would start to like look, and then in my quest to try to prove them wrong, I would start realizing, oh,
exactly,
here's the actual proof.
Yep.
And that's like one of the biggest ways that I've like actually shifted out of a lot of my beliefs, because it's like once I started to like just consider, it's like something so absurd. And it's like so I think the more that we can be open and honest as well about our own journeys, you know what I mean? Because when somebody hears or sees somebody else openly say, well, hey, I really used to, like, for me, right? I talk about how like I used to be a really hardcore left-leaning politically, you know what I mean? I used to be very like, oh, I'm a Democrat because I care about people.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. I mean, like, what a crock of shit. Yeah. And it's like the more I think people hear how I allowed myself to question that and how much it, shifted what I believe, and then shifting beyond identity with any one side or any one party, you know what I mean? Because it's so not that. That's part of it too, And so I think the more we can just prompt people's thoughts and question them, and it's like, well, who told you that, right? Or what makes you think that, or right, And then they because if they have to start to like argue for their own viewpoint, they start to realize their own viewpoint is held up on matchsticks.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not valid. Yeah.
I always say, like, you're flicking at this house of cards at the lower deck where it's just leaning very precariously, and just one card collapses the whole deck, because then you realize like they're not creative with their playbook. It's the same for everything.
Same thing and that's exactly why you see people freaking out when they get challenged. You see these literal meltdowns that people have because they can't even abide, because deep down we all know when we're bullshitting ourselves.
Right. And it, you know what, Lindsay, too, is like when you, like, I like what you said, get them to back up their claims, and I'll usually sometimes say, no, I don't want to know what CNN told you to say. I really want to know, like, what do you think? And even something, that we can't see, like gravity or a virus or anything that we have to rely on them. It's like, well, then tell me how you can prove it exists.
Right.
Show me how you can prove any of this exists, except for what, like when I can look in a telescope and see that, rocket ships are going into the water. Right. And they're just bilking us for, $45 million a day from NASA. Or through the virus. Like, you can't see the virus, but we can. And we're here to tell you that, it's very dangerous, and you have to do this, which coincidentally profits us, but that's okay.
But don't worry about that.
Don't
Look
worry
over
about
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look over here. There's
Yeah,
a war
the
going
other
on in
thing,
Ukraine.
Like that was a whole other. Oh my god! I remember the amount of freaking people freaking out on me when that started.
But it's like no, but this is real. This one's real.
Yeah, and then and it's like too when you can get people to the one I like to throw at people as well to make them think is like, well, if it's definitely so true, right? If it's definitely as they say, then why can't anybody question it? Why is anybody who has a differing opinion being silenced and shunned? And it's like, because, do you know what I mean? Like truth,
right?
Truth, and that's like the thing too. I don't care if somebody agrees with me or not. I'm not going to argue. Like I can tell when somebody's not interested in actually having a discussion.
Right.
And they're just not, and I'm not going to give it my energy, right? You're not getting, because I don't need to convince you. I don't need to convince anybody.
Exactly.
Because I know so fucking deeply in here. And that's so it's like, okay, cool. You don't like me anymore? Cool. Go, fine.
That's it. That's again, comes right back to when you have that deep inner knowing.
Inner knowing. You don't need to convince anybody of anything. You're
not out there proselytizing, like, I gotta show you, like, this is true. I mean, for me, I do a little song and dance with my patients because they are so inundated with these toxic poisons. So I want to say, and as an RN, they will listen to me because I know, 35 years in the field, they will listen, and I'll give them pamphlets from Weston A. Price on cholesterol, like the truth about cholesterol, and I'm making my own pamphlet on D3. So it's just, but that's to me the crack of light that goes in the shadows. It's like, and if they're doing this about cholesterol and they're fine with giving you rat poison, what else?
What else? Yeah.
And then silence, like,
Yeah.
What else could
and that's when you're getting to, it's like right there, right? And you can see in somebody, it's like there's just like this like scale almost of like, on the one end, it's the person who can't even consider that everything could be a lie. It's just too massive for them to think about that might be a lie, because then what else is a lie, and then so they just want to, and that's the really extreme person who's probably so freaking cut off from their own spirit, their own inner knowing, their own intuition, that it's just like almost like what everybody calls the NPCs. You know what I mean? It's like you're just like a non-player, like there's not even an intelligence there. You're like an Agent Smith or whatever, and it's like that's the one end of it. And then you start to like go up the scale of like the person who I like to think of like my mom and my stepdad. They're kind of like in the middle where certain things that's like, oh yeah, totally, they can see, right? But then other things, it's like, no, that's too big. I'm not ready to consider that one might have been a lie yet.
Yeah, that's it. And I was even like that at first. It's just like, it's just too much. I'm not gonna, that one I'm putting back on the shelf. Even though when they said it and I get this feeling, this hit inside, it's like, oh yeah, I know that one's true, but it's too much.
It's too much. I know. That was probably one of my big ones too. Even I was like in my mid-20s, and I remember sitting there and starting to like see through the narrative like we get fed about our country, and just how it was, you just start to see through, and it's like, but damn, I really wanted to believe like they were the good guys, right? Or we're the good guys.
Yeah. Oh,
and then
there
you start to like understand that, okay, it's not so clean. There's not a clean line of like the good and the bad and the black and the white. You know what I mean? It's been so blurred.
It's been so blurred so that we continue to attack each other.
Yeah, and feel confused and divided.
Yeah. So I'll go to war.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because they know, and that's the big thing too, is right, they know how to manipulate that. So that like tribal brain, right? That reptilian brain, that part of the brain that's just so ancient and rooted in survival. and it's constantly scanning for like, what's the threat? And it's like in the modern, okay, I'm not going to get attacked by a saber-toothed cat. I'm not going to die if I don't have fire. But there's still that part of the brain that needs that, I have to stay part of the community. I have to stay part of the tribe.
Yeah.
And they know how to manipulate that. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what we saw with all the narratives that have been coming out. It's like this, and now they just want to throw everything that questions anything. Oh, that's misinformation.
Yeah.
It's like the laziest thinking ever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's another way I like to challenge people. And I'm like, well, that's lazy thinking.
Yeah.
And it just kind of stops them in their tracks and makes them go, well, wait a second. And it's like, if we can just create that moment of like, wait a second.
That, I think, like the laziness and that lazy thinking of just, okay, this is what we need to believe to be part of the tribe. So I'm going to forget the other thing. And then now all of these articles out of, all of the touted journals, New York Times and whatever else, are saying that it's very dangerous to do your own research and that you can succumb to conspiracy theories. And that's what I want to say too. Like I just wanted to say one more thing, that when you're waking up, like I have all of the information that you guys do because I was one of you, plus another 1,000 hours of different levels of research. Not that are all just in an echo chamber supporting what I'm looking for, but to say I'm truly looking at all sides so that then I can discern. And it's usually, it's an inner knowing, but it's also what are my eyes observing?
Yeah.
On a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just that little bit right there. Because that is one of the things I see so much in the flip side of like people who are, like I said, the truther, the awakened, the free, right? It's like there's still, if you can't expose yourself to this side, right? Because you have to look at all sides and then come to your own conclusions. And that's still not happening for a lot of people. Yeah. There's still a lot of people that are just, okay, here, I'm over here on this side now, and here's what they've said. So now I'm just going to take that. And it's like, that's still not thinking for yourself. You're not thinking for yourself until you've looked at all the perspectives and decided inside of you what is true for you.
And that's where the laziness factor comes in. It's like, okay, now I'm just going to decide that this is just how it is for the rest of my life. Then surround myself with the echo chamber.
Yeah, because it takes effort to challenge your own thoughts.
Yeah. And admit, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Dead wrong.
I was fooled. I bought into some bullshit. I totally thought it was wrong. Yeah.
My bad. And I'm sorry about the way I treated you when I was under that delusion. And then we can now have a conversation. It's like, great. Apology accepted. Now let's have a conversation soul to soul. Like I can actually see the person, not this facade of brainwashing and control and programming. Because the other thing I think I realized too with all of this is that, the television is on in my patient's house 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know it's on. I always have to go and turn it off, and they don't notice that it's on, but it's the constant programming. The television, the programming to create channels. They're channeling that information out into the world to then keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. So that the more you hear it repeated, the truer it becomes.
Especially when you're over here doing something and it's just going straight into the subliminal because you're occupied, your conscious mind is occupied doing something, and that's just going in, and it's like, no wonder.
No wonder.
That's one of the first things, right? People need to turn that shit off.
Yeah, turn the television off. We are now out of time. So where can people find you? This has been lit up. I could talk to you for another 6 hours.
We should definitely do this again.
Yeah, I would love that. We could probably solve all the world's problems if we had a full hour without interruptions.
So good, I know.
By the end.
Yeah. So where can people find me? Totally on social media, Instagram. I am Lindsay Carricarte. That's pretty much my handle across all social medias. You can always, yeah, reach out to me on any of the platforms. I do all of them: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Out there just disrupting as much as I can with
Yeah.
my content.
Yeah, I love your content. It's fresh, and I'm one of your big fans now because it's just like, oh yes, I didn't think about it that way. Or, oh yeah, singing to the choir today, whatever it is, it uplifts you, and that's what I want to listen to. That's the only content I want. When I feel lifted or elevated,
right.
energized afterwards.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things that I can leave everybody with something, right? It's like if something is making you cringe and crinkle and shut down,
Yeah.
turn it off. Stop
Turn it off.
exposing your stuff. That's your guidance. You know what I mean? When you're pulling away from something, that is your guidance.
That's your guidance right there. And then be expansive, open up.
Expansive,
I like that. Well, thank you so much for lighting up this hour, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being on the planet at the same time I am. And yeah, let's definitely do this again.
Definitely here for this mission.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me, Robin. This is awesome.
Thank you.